Outside the Box Reviews, we're taking a look at the Bandai Tamashii Nations SH Monsterarts King Ghidorah Special Color Edition. And this marks the second and a half time we've gotten this King Ghidorah figure from Monsterarts. We originally got one pretty early on in the Monsterarts line. It was actually one of the first two Monsterarts figures I ever picked up. And then that half kind of comes from when we got the Mecha King Ghidorah about a year ago that shared a lot of body parts with this guy. And now we just get a straight up repaint of the original. This special color edition is a very vibrant, bright gold that matches the iconic Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah poster that I've tried my best to replicate here. None of the action figures that exist in this line really have the articulation necessary to truly replicate that poster. It's a pretty dynamic poster. But what we see here in this set matches that. The Ghidorah is that much more vibrant gold that fits in with what the artistic interpretation looks like. And then we get the multicolored breath effects. The original King Ghidorah came with just the translucent yellow. This one comes with the ones that match the poster. One translucent yellow, one reddish orangey yellow, and one bright blue. On original look, this wasn't a figure I was really wanting to pick up until I saw the accessories it came with. So let's jump right into those and see what I found so interesting. With King Ghidorah, we get our standard Tamashii stage. Like any of them, it has 3 ports, though these 2 come plugged up, so you have to unplug them if you want to take full advantage of what this stage could do for you. We also get 3 Tamashii Arms. The standard arms we've gotten a million times. They have a hinge down there at the bottom where they can also swivel in the base, hinge at the midsection, and hinge at the top. All these hinges are also done by screws, so you can tighten or loosen them up depending on what you need to use them for. Just like the original King Ghidorah, we get these extender pieces. So these will go on top of the Tamashii arm, peg into the very top peg there, and they give you an increased length to the stage, and then a similar peg up there at the top. And then to peg into that, we have these clips. Now, these are what the energy beam effects rest on. These are a serious pain in the butt. I was really hoping with this reissue they would have retooled the breath effects and allowed them to work with just simply the peg and have them peg in like every other breath effect they've ever done. But unfortunately, we have these clips that the pieces rest on, and then you have to balance them in Ghidorah's mouth. Now, of course, this midsection here is optional depending on how high you want the breath effect, but every other piece here is pretty much required to get the effect going. The beams themselves are a lot of unique, vibrant colors. The most unique here is the blue, and I do love the sculpt on these, all the kind of wispy bits coming out that look like those gravity beam effects, these little loops coming off to the side. I think they're really neat looking. There's a nice texture to them. They are translucent, so they'll pick up light really well. Overall, very cool looking. Here we have the slightly more orange one, which really is only really orange in the tips, kind of goes to a yellow in the middle, and then gets orange again back here at the end. And then we have the more yellow beam, which still has a little bit of orange there at the ends, though a lot more subtle. I thought this was very similar to the original color, until I brought in the original color next to it and saw just how vibrant yellow this thing is. I'd kind of forgotten that it looked like that, but it's definitely a very large difference in color. But you can see the sculpt is still pretty much the same. I don't think they really changed too much. There's a couple different versions of the beams, but they're all pretty much the same. And here's a quick example of what you can achieve. It's kind of hard to fit all on camera here, but it really is a pain in the butt to set up. If I go a little lower here, you can see where the 2 lower beams connect. They're just resting on these cradles, so what I kind of find you have to do is get your stage in place, get the arms at the length you want them, kind of attempt to line them up by eye with the head that you're corresponding the beam to, and then rest the beam gently in the back of Ghidorah's throat, and then kind of rest it gently on the end of the cradle here. With the example of the blue beam here, because it's coming down at a lower angle than the other 2, it was actually trying to slide because it's just a cradle, not actually a clip, and I actually had to use this little piece in the beam that juts out to the side alongside the clip to kind of hold it in place and keep it from falling out. Next up, we get a little tiny time machine accessory. And I thought this was going to be really cool until I got it and saw how really tiny it is. I did not think it was going to be this small. This is something that I really think would probably fit in better with the Mecha King Ghidorah. I'll probably have it positioned next to him on my shelf. But it is interesting. They gave us these little turbine fans in the back. There's some good color in here with the little gray bits and the whiter bits and the overall light gray of the piece itself. But once you get it on the Tamashii stage here, you can just see how minuscule it is, and it's really not going to stand out on the shelf, especially with this big chunky hinge right here. It almost overwhelms the very tiny little time machine. It was one of the things I was actually really excited for this set with, and I feel a little cheated. It probably is closer to being in scale with the figures being this size, but I'd almost rather they cheat it just to give me something that looks more visually appealing. And last but not least, we get our stand, our flight stand. Something we hadn't gotten before. Here on the base. The base is a nice shiny black pentagon. Kind of surprised they went black instead of using clear like they've used on a lot of their Tamashii stages. But it is hollow on the bottom. And then we have the Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah logo there. Some copyright gunk. And then this arm coming up to this big plasticky hinge here in the middle. This has a nice ratchet joint to it. You can hear it sounds very, very strong, despite the fact that the clip on top isn't the greatest from what we just saw. Now, it almost looks like there is another hinging mechanism here, or maybe it's just a way that they could change things out. I'm not really sure. It looks like it should do something else here at this center part, but I can't get mine to. And then, as you saw before, this piece just slides on here. And it does feel like it clips into place really solidly. It just, for some reason, falls off from time to time. Now, this piece, you can see, is contoured to King Ghidorah's body. First, I was a little bummed that they didn't give us a generic flight stand, but then I realized the Rodan and the Mothra, Batra flight stands they've given us before have been custom contoured to their figure. And I guess with higher-end pieces, you really want something that's going to really fit the character and not be one-size-fits-all and possibly fail. So this, you can see, has a little tray for the two tails, the chest of the figure, and then the three heads coming up here in front. So we can take our figure and just kind of gently rest it there on the stand. Kind of hard to do while I'm filming. We get it there on the stand. We can kind of use everything to position the heads in place up here in the trays. We get the tails in there. And then we get what I think is a pretty badass looking flight stand. You really get the figure in a cool flying pose. Despite the big black base, the clear part that goes over the chest, the necks, and the tails really doesn't show up too badly. It doesn't look horrible and distract from the figure too much. There is the actual hinge piece, which I understand needs to be strong, but there's so much plastic here. It's really kind of intrusive in the look here. I almost would have rather it just be the black plastic instead of even trying to be clear. But if we rotate the figure around, you can see it's still pretty impressive. For getting a very large Monsterarts figure like this onto a flight stand, I think it worked out pretty well. I'm really hoping I'll be able to fit this figure in my Detolf once it's on this stand. I haven't tried it yet. I'm kind of nervous about it, but hopefully that works out and he'll be able to be flying in my Detolf. As far as the sculpt goes on here, all three heads are the same, all three necks are pretty much the same, so we'll just kind of cover one and use that to represent all. As I already mentioned, the bright, vibrant gold on here, much brighter and more vibrant than the original, but I love the sculpt here, the horns sticking out every direction. They're a little softer plastic, so they can tend to warp a bit if you're not too careful. We have Ghidorah's eye there, which is really cool. Look, a nice slit cat eye with the brown center. No real shading over this gold either to bring out any scales or anything. Kind of almost looks like it needs a wash. If we open up the mouth, we can see the roof is really nicely detailed there. He has all his individual sharp teeth. And the same can be said for the bottom of the mouth, and he has a really cool, smooth, pinkish red tongue in there, which this thing is awesome looking. And taking a look at the bottom of the head, you can see the little beard spikes coming off the bottom, which I really like. Going down the necks, we continue this very rough, kind of sharp, scaly texture up at the top. We have these dorsal spines coming down his neck. And then the underside, we actually have the more snake-like underscales, a little smoother, pretty much what you'd see on any reptile like that. Coming down, we have the place where all three necks connect and kind of goes into the upper torso here. Really rough, sharp scales up here in this section, and the little kind of stumps where each head connects there. My torso doesn't seem to want to sit all the way down on the body. Feels like I might just have a ball joint that needs to be popped a little further in, but it's very tight, and there's not really a good place to grab this figure and push down on it with any real force. So I might try to use a hairdryer and loosen it up and then do it that way. But right now, there's a bit of a gap in there that my other figure doesn't have, and it actually makes it a little harder to get on the flight stand as well. Coming around here to the back of the figure where the wings connect. This was the biggest thing for people who own the original version. With this figure coming out, would Bandai Tamashii Nations redo the wing attachments? And it looks like the answer is no. They look like they're the exact same piece, though so far I've heard better stories. I wasn't sure if my original Ghidorah was messed up or not. I got mine on one of those Amazon warehouse deals detail, so it had been displayed previously. And now comparing it to this, you can see how the kind of midsection here butts up and looks pretty nice in that section. My original one, this top section is kind of drooping down. You can see that something's not right with the wing. Going down the wing, we continue those rough scales that characterize the rest of the body of Ghidorah until we get to this nice gold foily section here for the actual membranes. I think the wings just have a great sculpt. There's some nice wrinkles in here representing all the folds in the wing. We have the more rigid sections going down the middle, and each is tipped in this nice little gold spike. But as overall with this figure, there's no paint shading on it, so it's all just a very bright, vibrant gold, which looks cool, but it's just all gold. Going down to the lower torso of the figure, more of the same we got here. The legs are kind of stumpy, as they're supposed to be on King Ghidorah. Then he has his cool little four-toed feet, and we even do get some sculpted detail there on the base of his feet, which I really like. Going around to the tails, the main torso here is kind of where it starts to split apart, and then we get the multi-segmented tails. Very, very long pieces. Coming back here in the big gold carpet beater type endings, which I always love. Very sharp and spiky. So, of course, going into a redo of King Ghidorah, another big thing we're going to be looking at is the articulation. The articulation was always good on the original figure, aside from those breaking wings, but joints had a tendency to pop apart, as they do on Monsterarts figures. Especially the older ones, all of them were kind of ball joints. There's not a lot of hinges or other styles of joints. So there's just always a chance things are going to pop apart. The necks are multi-segmented. There's several different segments here making up each neck, so you can get a really cool range of motion out of them. All of them are very posable. I have noticed in some segments, I can't even get to replicate it now, but this head especially has a tendency to kind of hit a space. There we go. There's just an area where it won't quite lock and it will flop around a little bit, but you can always kind of go to the next joint and get it to stay with that one. So you might have to finagle it a little bit. Be a little careful with it, but you can get what you want out of it. Now, the only place so far I've had joints pop apart on me, and I have been being more careful than I was on my original one just because I know what the joints are like, has been the head joint. It's actually not this head that's fallen off, but I have had the head pop off while trying to pose it. But still, once again, just on a ball joint, pops right back on, but you get that same great motion. Everything can twist and move up, down, left, right, whatever direction you want. The mouth is on a hinge. It's actually on a ball joint, so you could rotate the jaw if you want, but it's supposed to be really just hinged. Opens up nice and wide. The tongue is also on a hinge, so if you get something very narrow in there, you can lift up the tongue a little bit and position that around as well, giving it a much more lifelike feel. At the mid-torso, we do have a ball joint, so here Ghidorah can go a little forward, a little back. Not a lot of range there, but also mine feels very stiff. You can almost hear it creaking. You can also rotate a little bit. We could tilt a little bit. I feel like my joints are just really stiff, and that's what's preventing the motion. Actually, never mind that statement. I just went and picked up my original release, and he's not much more articulated there either. Coming back around to the infamous wings, then you're always going to want to handle as close to that joint as you can, but they are on a nice hinge. They will go up and they will go down. Just be very careful with them. There's a little in and out movement you can get with them as well, but for what they are, they're really nicely articulated wings. The legs are on ball joints, so they will go a little bit forward, a little back, and a little in and out. Not exactly a great range of motion there, but once again, it's kind of what you'd expect with a figure like this. You can also rotate a little bit there up at the hip. You have a nice double jointed knee with a good range of motion. I always love how Monsterarts puts that floating kneecap in there. You also get a ball joint in the lower shin to add a little more motion there, and then a ball joint there at the foot, which can move pretty much whatever direction you want. Going back to the tails, similar to the necks, just a bunch of multi-segmented ball jointed pieces so you can rotate or bend wherever you want, and these do seem to be a little more solid than the original release. They don't feel like they're going to pop off quite as easily. Still, potentially, I know some of you are going to be like, oh yeah, mine popped off the second I touched it, but mine so far feels pretty good. For comparison, I wanted to bring in our other examples of Ghidorah. On the left here, we have the original release. On the right here, we have the Mecha King Ghidorah, and then of course our new version here in the center. And, well, if you're OCD about your Ghidorah, you might have an issue because we have three distinct different colors of gold between these three versions. The original release has a very muted gold, which I have to say, seeing it next to this new version, I actually really am appreciating that duller color a lot more. I feel like it looks much more realistic than this bright, shiny gold one. We did also get a lighter tone of gold here on Mecha King Ghidorah. It's not nearly as dark as the original release, but not nearly as vibrant as our new version. So, kind of interesting. And as much as I don't want to be super excited over a repaint, if you saw my big review of all the different Godzilla repaints, you know that the ones that don't do anything new with the character really kind of disappoint me. But I think for a lot of people who missed out on the original King Ghidorah, this is going to be an amazing piece to add to your collection. And I think for people who do have the first King Ghidorah, you might still want to consider it. I'm not regretting picking this guy up. Even after saying that, the figure itself may not get displayed in my collection. But I'm definitely going to put the original King Ghidorah, the one that I like the colors of better, on the stand. Hopefully it'll fit in my DTOF like that. I now have some cool different color beams that I think will be really awesome. The blue in particular I think would be really cool to use with a Mecha King Ghidorah figure. And I have a little time machine that I could hand somebody a magnifying glass and let them look at in my collection if they came over. But if you don't have the original, I would hope the color here isn't enough to turn people off. It's still gold, it's still King Ghidorah in every other respect. The craftsmanship on the figure itself feels more solid. I haven't played with it as much as I have the other figure, the original figure, but I get the impression that the joints are going to hold up a little better, that everything's going to be a little happier as time goes on. Can't guarantee it, but I feel that's going to be the case. And really, at the end of the day, the biggest problem I have with this is a problem I have with the original. The effects beams just are not well engineered. They really should have rethought it when they were redoing it. But I assume it was much cheaper on their end just to give us the old ones again and say what the hell. But overall, a solid recommend for this figure. Maybe not a must-have for your collection, but I know there's going to be some people who are very happy to add it to theirs. And I feel it's fitting to mention in this review of another recolor, the second Monsterarts review in a row I've done of that we're finally getting out of the recolor phase. We are going to get a GMK Godzilla that I'm very happy about from Monsterarts, one of my favorite Godzilla suit designs. And the thing that seemed long overdue, the original Godzilla, the 1954 Godzilla. NECA's done one of those. I'm very happy to see Monsterarts stepping up to the plate and taking it on themselves. And NECA's also doing the GMK, so we've got some comparisons to do coming up in the next few months. But in the meantime, I'll have plenty more giant monster action to come, more giant monster mania. Make sure you follow me on Instagram, username Outside the Box Reviews. Also check me out on Facebook, link below. And until next time, this has been our Outside the Box Reviews, Giant Monster Mania. Stay tuned for more to come.